After a lengthy beta cycle, iOS 14.5 is likely coming next week after Apple's spring-loaded event on Tuesday, April 20th. And you should download it not just for the new emojis and Apple Watch mask unlock, but for the new privacy rules called App Tracking Transparency, or ATT for short, that gives you control over which apps can track you on iOS. Now, you may have heard Mark Zuckerberg crying about this recently, so I've been lovingly referring to it as the Facebook Slayer. And in this video, I'm going to explain to you how these companies track you across the internet and how app tracking transparency can help so you can make the best possible choice for your data.
One Tech Mind.
What is up, people? I'm Lance Somoza, the guy with the One Tech Mind, and this is where I bring the knowledge so you can use Apple products to their absolute fullest. So look, we've all been there. You pick up your phone and start searching for something to buy online, maybe a new Star Wars shirt. Then hours or days later, you're scrolling through Instagram and what do you see? A targeted ad for a Millennium Falcon tumbler. And for a split second, you start to wonder if the robots really are listening. But trust me, it's your search history and overall online activity. But you're strong. You're not one to be easily swayed by ads. And hold on one sec. All right, yes, I admit they got me on that one. But the tumbler is from Igloo, so it's actually a pretty good product. Let me know in the comments if you ever bought something based off a clearly targeted ad and how it went, for better or worse. And the truth is, we allow big corporations to make money off our data all the time because technology is just so darn convenient. Common offenders like Facebook and Instagram take your personal and device information, correlate it with a third-party data broker that you don't know from Adam, and boom, they're able to track you across devices, websites, and services all over the internet. They probably know more about you than you do yourself at this point. And this is a high-level simplification of how tracking works. So if you're interested in learning more, Apple put together an amazing white paper that's very easy to understand. It's called A Day in the Life of Your Data, and it uses a father-daughter trip to a playground as a backdrop to illustrate how many times a day you leave your data behind for these brokers and advertisers to follow, like a trail of breadcrumbs. I'll link that in the description down below if you want to take a look. But aside from Facebook and Instagram, you'd be hard-pressed to find a company that isn't tracking you online in one way or another. It's basically the world we live in now. But other companies like Apple are trying to make this a little better by giving us, the consumer, more awareness and control over our data and when we share it, at least on Apple's platforms. This is where ATT comes into play. Starting with iOS 14.5, when an app developer wants to track you, not only in their app, but across apps or websites owned by other companies, you'll receive a prompt asking whether you would like to allow this or not. This is very similar to when iOS asks for your approval before sharing your location data or microphone access, for example. And just so you know, once you're on iOS 14.5, there may be a little lag time before you start seeing the ATT pop up, since some developers haven't updated their apps to support the new rules just yet. And if you answer yes to the prompt, you're giving consent to allow the developer to track you. And they can do this in different ways. Perhaps they use your user ID for their service, a unique identifier assigned to your profile, or even your name and email address. And the developer can also give a reason why they want to track you, which in most cases I imagine will be similar to what the Joe app says here, for instance, for enhancing customer experience. And yes, some, if not all, developers will use your data to improve their app, but many of them will also compare and correlate your information with those pesky data brokers. Now, I'm not advocating that you ask every single app not to track you, because I like to believe there are ethical people and companies out there. I can't help it, I'm a hopeless optimist. But if you do, just know that the developer isn't allowed to withhold functionality just because you ask them not to track you. So in many cases, asking them not to track may just mean less targeted ads and more generic ones. Oh no, the horror. To help you make a decision per app, I would suggest checking out the app's privacy nutrition label in the App Store, another new requirement that explains the app's privacy policies just as if it were a box of cereal off the shelf. And I mentioned the Joe app earlier, which is used to order that liquid gold called coffee from your favorite local coffee houses. Since it's asking to track me to improve the app, I'm going to see what their policies are, because I have no idea who made this app and what their agenda may be. Looking at their privacy label, I can see they want my user ID and device ID in order to track me across other apps and websites. If I allow this, I can only imagine I'll receive ads for more coffee goods very soon. I can also see what data is linked to me when I use their app. For example, they get my device ID and phone number for marketing purposes, and even more information like payment info, name, and phone number again for app functionality, which makes sense in this case because I am paying for coffee orders through their app and I receive notifications. In the case of Joe, it doesn't sound terribly nefarious what they're asking for, but I am going to ask them not to track because I want to start limiting how my data is used and accessed. And because I don't need additional ads to get me to buy more coffee stuff, I will definitely do that on my own anyway. By comparison, here's Instagram's privacy label. They want to use my contact information in order to identify me on other websites, such as my physical address, name, and phone number. This should come at no surprise. They also link a ton of data to me for advertising, analytics, and more. Yeah, I don't know about you, but I can't wait to deny Instagram and Facebook this access when their app is updated for ATT. And if you ever want to review which apps have asked for your permission to track, you can dive into Settings, Privacy, and Tracking. From here, you can make adjustments as needed by flipping the toggles to either enable or disable tracking on a per app basis. Now, with all that said, there are 3 scenarios where developers still can use your data even with the new ATT rules. First, Apple says that developers can use your information for advertising purposes as long as the analysis happens on your device, and they do not send this info off your device in a way that identifies you. So if a developer does send completely anonymized information about you to a broker or somewhere else on the internet, that sounds permissible even with ATT in place. And this matches with Apple's own ethos, which is to process as much information on your device as possible instead of sending it to the almighty cloud, where who knows what happens to it. Second, it's not considered tracking when your information is shared with a data broker solely for the purposes of fraud detection or security. And third, it's not considered tracking when your information is shared with a consumer reporting agency. The best example would be running a credit check when you sign up for a new line of credit to support your apparent new camera addiction. And I'll say it like this: with app tracking transparency, Apple continues to demonstrably reinforce privacy as a core feature of all their hardware, software, and services. They are absolutely putting their money where their mouth is. And I know it's hard to live without some of these apps and services, especially during a pandemic, when it has often been the only way to connect and interact. And you may be saying, Lance, I've got nothing to hide. What's the big deal if I receive targeted ads for the things I like? I mean, you bought that Igloo tumbler. And to that I say 2 things. Number 1, how dare you? And number 2, I hear this kind of thing all the time, and I get it, because I've got nothing to hide, or at least I feel like I got nothing to hide. But my response to this line of thinking is, we may have an idea of what our data is used for today, but what about tomorrow or a year from now? What about social media disinformation campaigns? And how can we possibly trust faceless data brokers and know if they support any kind of data encryption or ethical privacy policies? Just this week, Facebook itself suffered another breach exposing personal information for more than 500 million users. Need I say more? Now, I said I was a hopeless optimist, but that doesn't mean I turn a blind eye to these things, and I hope you don't either. So the next time you download that shiny new app and it asks to track you or your location, I encourage you to pause before spamming allow, and think if handing over your data is truly worth the convenience. Maybe you can use the tools Apple's given you to fine-tune those settings and not give direct access to your location, for example, but merely a proximity-based one. So if I gave you some insight into app tracking transparency and how you can make the best decisions for your own personal experience, do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe, and bell so you don't miss the next videos. And let me know what you thought of this one down in the comments below. Would you like to see more privacy explainers like this one? I would love to hear from you. You can also reach out to me on Twitter and Instagram with any Apple or tech-related questions. I am at Cyric Starman on those platforms. And until next time, thanks for listening to my One Tech Mind.